Demetrius Johnson, possibly the greatest fighter of all time, was on Ariel's show, and he talked about Jon Jones going up to heavyweight. And Demetrius was very complimentary of Jon, and he simply said that Jon could have done that at 205 pounds. Now, I think that we all agree that. I think that we all have always agreed to that. And it does make you look back. Was the Jon Jones experiment up to heavyweight, was that the worst decision in MMA history? Was it the worst career decision that you've seen somebody make? I mean, you've got a world champion who gives the belt back and waits 3 years, goes and prepares for 3 years to try to become world champion. He took 3 years of training to attempt to come back to gain what he had and handed back initially. I mean, conceptually, I think that that's tough. And you get the fine details and say it's a different weight class. Okay, fair enough, but it's not a better weight class. You went into the worst weight class, right? Like, the heavyweights suck. Did Jon Jones prove that he is a better fighter than we already thought that he was, or did he just prove that the heavyweights suck? In all fairness, I went to heavyweight a number of times. I never had an easier time in the sport. When you look at top 10 lists, you don't see heavyweights. When you would have heavyweights that were absolute stars, the Muhammad Ali's, the Mike Tyson's, the absolute stars, when you had a pound-for-pound list, they still didn't make it, right? The biggest draw, and they're bringing in all that, they still didn't make it. And I even came from the sport of wrestling as Jon Jones did. We got a guy named Alexander Karelin, the Russian great. But he didn't make anybody's pound-for-pound list. He was the most feared man in the entire sport. He was the most feared man in sport. He was the flag bearer at the Olympic Games, multiple games. They have the flag bearer, whoever they respect the most. And respect and fear, pretty similar definitions. I mean, I'm just sharing for you, this man was frightening. He was incredible. Alexander was absolutely incredible. My favorite athletes ever. He didn't make a pound-for-pound list. He's a heavyweight. They suck. I'm just sharing for you, like, what did we accomplish bumping Jon up? What did we get? Like, from a financial perspective, the Jones family bank account is a hell of a lot weaker than it would be had he just kept a normal schedule, which most guys fight 3 times a year. You get a prima donna. Prima donna fights twice a year, but that's still 6 fights. 6 fights at the contract you were on versus one of what you... I mean, do you understand? I don't want to get too much into his business. I just want to talk about Demetrius's point, because I have the same belief in Jon. I think Jon could have beat everybody weighing in at 205 pounds. And I heard stories from the practice room from heavyweights themselves. I'll keep the names out of it, but the top guys in the world, I could really impress you with the names. Champions, world champions, heavyweights, that would tell you in private how hard the goes were with Jon, how dominant Jon was. I don't think that there was anybody, I never met the person, that thought Jon had to weigh X amount before he could go and beat heavyweights. We all thought that Jon could just show up and beat all the heavyweights. It's heavyweight. I mean, but this is a very real thing. And I do wonder, I think Demetrius meant it as a compliment to Jon. I know when I say it, I do. When I say he could show up, he was about 225. When Jon was on steroids, he'd be about 228 before he would start to get 225 to 228. When he got off of steroids, his weight was about 218 to 222. I share that with you because whether it was 218 to 222 or when he was juiced and he was, he was under 230, I never met a man that could beat him. I never saw a man that I would bet on or pick or predict or with good faith believe could beat Jon. It wouldn't have anything to do with a scale it's a very interesting phenomenon because I mean that is one thing about Jon that is truly interesting. As great as he is and as skilled and talented as he is, he's measured. And he doesn't take huge risks. And he doesn't overly believe in himself. That could be a dangerous thing. To have a confidence and arrogance, to not be aware of the world around you, right? To believe in yourself to these abilities as opposed to being more measured, taking your time, preparing, studying, getting ready for this guy, no matter how good you are, taking all of them real seriously. That is something that Jon does. And I haven't heard him credited for it, but he should get credited for it. You want to know who else did that? Was St. Pierre. Jon Jones is as careful about picking his opponents or choosing or agreeing to opponents, when he's going to fight him, what weight class he's going to fight, how he's going to prepare. He is as careful as George was. And George was not going to take any risk, and he didn't care who knew that. Don't call me on short notice. Don't call me on a weak notice. Don't call me to do a favor. I'm a professional. Here's how I do it. Your matches and your ideas are going to fit within how I do it. You're going to fit within my paradigm. I'm not coming to yours. And he was good enough to back it up, but everybody stood back. We said, all right, we'll do it George's way. If we can't beat him, we're going to have to join him. And I like that about Jon. I mean, I really got to tell you, I like the human side to Jon. I'm not sure it needs to be there. I'm not sure there's ever been a night since he got in this sport. What was he, 21 years old when he got in this sport? I'm not sure there's ever been a night where there's anybody under contract where he's coming in. I mean, he'd been drunk 2 days before. What did he tell Daniel Cormier? I was high on cocaine and I still kicked your ass. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a time when there was somebody, regardless of weight class, that could have dealt with him. But he does. He does. He thought it needed to be 240. I wish he would elaborate on that sometime. Why 240? He must have seen someone. He must have felt someone. He must have studied heavyweights and seen that that was a great size. But remember that? Remember when Jon had to weigh 240? It's this really interesting thing. He got to like 242 and he took a picture on Instagram. It's a really interesting thing. What would you rather be? Would you guys rather be 242, soft and fat, or would you rather be in great shape and weigh 228? I take the great shape at 228, but I'm not a two-division world champion. It's one of those spots. I think that my opinion matters. I think that I'm right. I have the right to an opinion. I've earned it. Not as much as him. It's just the reality. I went and talked about somebody doing it. He went out and was the guy that actually did it. He thought he needed to weigh 242 pounds. I agree with Demetrius Johnson. I feel as though I can stand back and see the sport as clear as Demetrius. I think Demetrius is right. I think I'm right. I think that Jon Jones, taking 3 years, moving up to heavyweight, was a colossal waste. I think it was a waste of 3 years. I think if you would have told Jon Jones, who's a national wrestling champion, you can take on a kickboxer who's never had a wrestling match in his life. You don't need to wait 3 years. We'll let you have him today. By the way, he's got a beautiful record of 16-0. He's not half bad looking. He cuts an all right promo. He's got a funny video going around where he imitates Nate Diaz. I mean, this guy can draw a little bit. We had a belt around him. Don't ask us how, but we had a belt around his waist somehow, somewhere in recent time. You can fight that guy. I feel as though Jon might have still taken the 3 years. He's very measured. And when you get ready to tell the Jon Jones story, when the whole thing is done, there is some compliments that you have to give him. And you can say a lot of things about Jon, but he is not foolishly confident. He's not. He's not foolishly arrogant. He's very measured at certain things. And when you do look back, 3 years. The greatest talent we've seen, 3 years. That should be 9 fights. He's a prima donna, but it was a solid 6. $30 million gone. Because somewhere in his head, he thought his fat ass needed to weigh 242 pounds to take a kickboxer down. How do you tell him he's wrong? How do you tell him he's wrong? He took the 3 years, he got matched up with the right guy in a sold-out arena, and put on the most one-sided beating in heavyweight title fight history. It's very difficult to question that.